My name is Alice Munyua, and today we're going to talk about psychotic disorder. So it's the same as psychosis, psychotic disorder. It's a type of mental illness, but the reason why I want to talk about this is because most people don't really understand what psychosis is. I remember 2 years ago, I had an incident where I ended up in the hospital and I got the wrong diagnosis. The doctor actually said that I was bipolar. I didn't believe it, but the signs and symptoms that I was showing, or the symptoms that I was expressing, were more related to psychosis. So let's talk about psychosis and see what it is. Psychotic behavior, most doctors really don't know what causes it. Sometimes they tend to think that there's a chemical disorder in the brain, there's a biological disorder, or a genetic component. Well, with me, no one in my family has ever had mental illness. I never had mental illness, but I ended up in a psych hospital, actually hospitalized, together with some of the patients I used to take care of. Because, you know, I've worked in a psychiatric area. I am a nurse practitioner on the medical side, but I've been a psychiatric nurse, and I've worked in psychiatry since 2001. So I ended up in the hospital with some of the patients I used to take care of. And they knew my name, and they were very happy that I was there. I don't know what to say about that. I would never, ever want to go through that again, and I would never wish it on anyone. And that's the reason why I'm actually doing these videos, to bring or shed a little light into what these issues are, or what they are, the problems that occur when people go through stuff like this. Now, I just want to say, people have a lot of stigma against people who have mental illness. I don't have mental illness, even though I ended up with this disorder and I ended up in the hospital. What we need to understand is human beings are spiritual beings. And because we are spiritual beings, we can interact with the spirit world, which we do not see. But it can happen. And what happened with me, well, let me tell you first of all the signs and symptoms of psychosis. Most people, you will see most people have delusions. What are delusions? Delusions are tendencies to believe in irrational ideas or false beliefs. And I want you to hold that thought. You have to kind of figure out why do we call them false beliefs? Who thinks that they are false, and why do they think that they are false? The other thing you'll see is impairment with reality. People, you'll find people saying that people have lost touch with reality. And that is psychosis, because what happens is people hallucinate. And when I talk about hallucination, is when you hear things that other people are not hearing, when you see things that other people are not seeing, when you feel things that other people are not feeling, when you taste and smell things that other people cannot see. But I want you to think about this. In the beginning, we are told, or we know, that God created things that we see and things that we don't see. So the unseen world is what most people with psychosis are interacting with. So other people can't see it because they are not meant to see it. There is also delusions, and delusions are false beliefs, so they say. Beliefs of fear. Most of these beliefs are actually based on fear, suspicions of other people. Like, you might find somebody being afraid of another person, disorganized thought, disordered thinking, and difficult concentrating. So the suspicion that you see with other people, it comes in form of anxiety. Like, when I was going through this, I was actually afraid of taking care of certain patients. I was afraid of some other people in my family. I was afraid of a lot of things in general. But sometimes you might also see depression. With me, I didn't have depression. For me, it was on the other side. It was more like manic kind of behavior. And that's where the doctor was getting confused, decided to take an incident that happened 18 years ago, combine the two, and she came up with a diagnosis of bipolar. But actually, she was doing guesswork. which is what most, I hate to say, most psychiatrists do guesswork. Well, there, I said it because it's the truth. Anyway, and you might also see people having sleep problems. I was having sleep problems. But what actually, and most of the time you won't see aggressive behavior with people who have psychosis, but sometimes you might see it. But it's not always the case. So let's talk about psychosis and see what it is. In my experience, the only way I can express psychosis, I can tell you it's a spiritual awakening. And regardless of what your spiritual path is, because people believe in different things and people engage in different spiritual paths. For instance, you could be a Christian, that's a spiritual path. You could be practicing Kemetic spirituality, that's a spiritual path. You could be a Hindu, that's a spiritual path. You could be a Buddhist, that's a spiritual path. You could be practicing Kabbalah, that's a spiritual path. Depending on what your psychic energy is, and I hate to use the word psychic, but yes, we do have spiritual powers. Depending, and all our powers are also different. My spiritual power is not the same as my kid's spiritual power. It's not the same as my mother's spiritual power. Everybody, depending on what your gifts are, you have different spiritual energy. Now, what I was going through, it was actually a spiritual awakening. And what I was about to say is spiritual awakening, regardless of what spiritual path you're on, it's always rough. It is not an easy thing to go through. Because what happens is you feel like you're waking up from a deep slumber. Things that were actually unconscious before, things that have always been there, but they've been on when you look at things, you don't see them, but they've always been there. You start seeing them. And when you start seeing those unconscious things, when they become conscious, you will see problems. You will feel other people's energy, and some people don't have good energy. And that's where the suspicion comes in. You start, because you're feeling their energy, you start being suspicious about them. Because you're seeing things with a spiritual eye, and you're actually feeling things with a spiritual eye. And that's why you feel things that other people don't feel. You see? The other thing that happened to me is with this spiritual awakening, and I told you that it's rough. Anybody who has ever gone through it, it's rough to go through. And most people are not even aware what's going on. Because I've never ever had anybody talk about spiritual awakening and what it is. And actually, that's why I'm doing these videos. To make this conversation ongoing, to tell you that it could happen to anybody. But this is not mental illness. You are just seeing people who are waking up spiritually. Now, when you go through it, things do calm down after a little while. And when they calm down, you are able to engage with other people. But when you're going through it, because of those things coming into, they were always underneath. You were never able to see them. So when they come up to the surface, there are many, many things that are wrong with this world. You will start feeling that. And it can be overwhelming. And that's where the lack of sleep comes in. Because you don't know what you're feeling, you don't know why you're feeling the way you're feeling, you don't understand anything. So with me, and I would love to talk more about this so I can actually tell people what spiritual awakening feels like, what you see. I was actually seeing things that other people are not seeing. I was also hearing voices. And I go into details in my book, Bipolar. I go step by step, what I was seeing, what I was hearing, and why I did the things that I was doing, which kind of got my family concerned, and that's why they ended up calling some other people to come help them take me to the hospital. So anyway, spiritual awakening is never easy. So what I could tell you is psychosis and spiritual awakening are actually two feathers of the same bed. And depending on what spiritual path you're on, sometimes you can see scary things. You can see ghosts. You can see strange creatures because you're seeing things with your spiritual eye, and you're also hearing things with your spiritual eye. It can be scary, and that's where you see all that coming in. Now, in my case, I was not aggressive. I knew the difference I knew what I was doing, and I knew what I was seeing, and I knew not to be aggressive. No matter what people said to me, no matter what they did, I knew not to fight with people. But now I was arguing a lot with people because, of course, I was hearing things from the spiritual side, and I was also seeing people talking to me. Now, and I could tell you exactly what was happening, who was saying what. I could tell you, and I documented my whole experience in here. Now, because of the spiritual thoughts that are coming in and the spiritual stuff that you're getting, it can activate the chemicals in your brain, because you know our brains are the head chemist for our chemicals, and your dopamine level can go up. And the higher it goes, the more paranoid you get, because you're going to start feeling strange things. Anyway, I hope that helps a little bit, just to bring a little attention to the spiritual side of a human being, and to tell you not to be scared of people with mental illness, and to tell you that this can actually happen to anybody. Now, depending on what spiritual path they are on. When you start seeing things with your spiritual eye, depending on what spiritual path you're on, you can see some strange stuff. So all I can say is, if you're on a different spiritual path other than the Christian spiritual path, and there's a reason why I'm saying this, you need a mentor, you need a spiritual guide, somebody who can actually, you can bounce things off, somebody who can actually see your behavior and tell you to tone things down. The reason why I say Christian, if you are a Christian, God, the Most High God, will never open your spiritual eye if you're not ready for it. He will only open it if you're ready for it. And He's gonna guide you through the process. And that's exactly what happened to me. I've never heard anybody talk about a spiritual eye opening, but I know with the Hindu religion they talk about the third eye. With other spiritual paths they talk about your spiritual eye opening. If you're gonna talk about the third eye, you're on a different path from the Christian path. So please get a guide, get a yogi, get a monk, get a spiritual guide or a master, someone to guide you through this process, because it's rough and you could actually end up in a hospital being diagnosed with mental illness when you're not even mentally ill. You are just seeing things from the spiritual perspective. So I hope that helps a little bit. But if you want to know everything about my story, this is a good book to read. Some of the things that I did when I was going through that were actually funny. They were not funny when they were happening, but they will make you laugh. This book reads like a novel. Some of the things I did will also make you cry. So I hope that helps. Thank you.